Okay.
Hello.
Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
This is our second official episode that we've done. So thanks for signing up. You were like the first one. We sent it out. You're just like right there. But yeah, if you want to introduce yourself to everybody that's watching and listening and kind of give them a little sauce about who you are and what you've been doing, that'll be fantastic.
Sounds good. My name is David Ebel. I'm a commercial banking officer for STCU. So I work here in town, mostly the Spokane area, fairly central. But yeah, I've been with them coming on 9 years now.
Nice.
In the banking industry, and then have kind of an all-around background and a whole bunch of different stuff. Kind of got here a strange route, but I've been in Spokane now here for probably 12 years now.
Okay. Where'd you come from before?
Came from born and raised in Wenatchee, so not too far. So Wenatchee, Washington, went to school there, graduated high school, and then jumped off to the military.
Nice. What branch?
Navy.
Nice. Thank you for your service.
Of course, thank you.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that's cool. I guess speaking of your military service, I won't get into too much of that, but is there anything from the military service into kind of your day-to-day that you carry from that kind of back and forth? Anything that you learned or lessons or kind of anything?
Yeah, I think the big one that impacts my role and kind of the job side is the teamwork aspect. Winning as a team, that's very kind of central to the military, but then when I got out, it's very... you can apply that to most areas of life, but what I do in kind of the commercial banking side, that's been something I've found success with, really approaching it with, whether it's the retail branches, whether it's merchant services, cash management, kind of coming at helping members holistically and not just, do you need a loan here? Or, what is your immediate need, but what is the need maybe you don't even know you have yet, and how can we kind of get you more to your end result and less about the immediate need? So I think that team side has been really great.
Gotcha. Yeah, more of the, like you said, holistic side of things, not just
get everyone in the room, and it's not all, it's less about a product or a service and more about where do you want to end up with your business.
Do you feel like that's the case because of that you work for a credit union versus a traditional bank, or do you think it would be the same if you worked for a traditional bank?
I think it depends on the individual and the officer and kind of how they go about it. I think I've seen success in both ways, but I've had business owners comment on that where it's nice that you're not calling over here for this and calling over here for this, and you kind of have a one-stop shop and you're holistically looking at the business operations.
For most people, could you describe the difference between the credit union versus a bank if people aren't familiar?
The most direct kind of easiest way to understand it is basically for-profit versus not-for-profit. So that idea of a board of directors versus a board managing. So credit union, in theory, the better they do, the better they can help serve their members and grow that way. So kind of the member-owned idea.
Okay, that's awesome. What is typical day in the life? I guess for a lot of people it depends, or it's this day versus that day. But I guess you're in the office, I don't know, 8 or 9 or whatever, and what are you starting with? What are you going through for the majority of your days, I guess?
I think commercial banking is nice because it's always different to some degree. The flow is a little bit there, but the days don't always look the same. But I would say you typically kind of like anyone dig through your email, and that's kind of more boring side. And then what I typically do is get out and visit members, visit their businesses, whether it's meeting for an actual meeting and they have a need, or even just popping in. I've just found that this is a people business. You can bank and have your services a lot of places. Everything's fairly relative. So that relationship and how well you know their business is, I think, what kind of really makes the difference. So I'm usually out and about a lot. I'm probably in the office half the time.
That's kind of nice, though.
Yeah, it is. And so it's always a little bit different. And you're getting to stop in and I want to make a relationship long before there's a need and there's something that way when they call me and they're, there's an immediate thing, whether it's stressful or not. I'm like, okay, I know how your business operates. I know kind of what your needs are. So.
What do you think, speaking for yourself for you as a person and also speaking on behalf of STCU, what do you think is the difference of why people choose STCU versus other banks? Because kind of like you said, it's for most people, banks are banks.
Sure.
You kind of just, I don't know, whatever one is convenient at the time. So what do you think differentiates your firm versus the others?
I think there's kind of two different sides to me. I think what a lot of times drives people to look at a credit union is the impact that their dollars or their business is going to bring back to the community. And so, how is that credit union investing, giving back, those types of things are, I think, what I typically hear people say is kind of what made them start looking into that realm. On the commercial side, whether it be lending or kind of overall portfolio, I'd say a lot of times it's the person, it's that relationship. How much time are you going to take to come out and know my business? And COVID was super interesting in that way with the PPP loans and that stuff. People got I talked to a lot of people that are like, there was kind of the shift of, I'll call my banker if I need money. And that to me has changed a lot, where people realized when something frantic and unexpected happened, people are like, who do I call? How quick can I reach him? Do I have his cell phone number? That type of stuff really changed. So I've found a lot of business owners really want that relationship a lot more now than maybe before. I think there was a stigma of kind of like, I'll call you when I need money and that side, which frankly, the irony of business lending is it's easier when you don't have an immediate need and you can build that.
That's what, kind of the common saying is like, it's easier to, get money when you don't need it.
And it's ironic, and I know it's frustrating to people sometimes, but it just is that world. And so if we can come in and know the business and know how you operate, and then gosh, if something happens and you're on vacation, it's like, do you know who you're going to call? So that I've found people really seem to want that more, and I think we do that really well as an organization. For sure.
And what types of businesses are you working with, or what types of businesses do you like working with versus others?
All types. I've worked with some really out-of-the-box stuff that's really fun, and I like that because it's very different in how cash flow moves and how their financials are done. But I would say typically manufacturing, service industry stuff, plumbers, electricians, people that are providing a service to their consumer, less than like, say, I have some of that stuff, but less in like the retail side. Or I feel like commercial banking, you see a lot of kind of business owner-occupier type stuff, and then you have kind of the commercial real estate investment arms. And so a lot of times lenders kind of have, one direction that they lean heavier in.
Gotcha. And obviously we work with a lot of startup companies. So startup companies versus your more traditional, lifestyle companies. What advice would you have for people that are looking to start a company, or for founders out there who are, trying to figure out the process of, maybe getting a loan, trying to figure out what bank to work with, different vehicles for managing their cash? What advice would you have for them?
Mine would be a little bit back to kind of my thoughts of, really pick a place, an organization, an officer, whatever that may be, that you feel you're going to be able to form that relationship with. Again, long before, startup lending obviously is very specialized.
It's different.
It's challenging. That's not something like, for instance, we don't have a startup loan product. That's not there's different ways. Obviously there's capital, there's, angel investing, there's these different routes. And so for the banking side, I would say, gosh, there's so much that can be done other than the lending side, whether that's merchant services and how you take your payments, whether it's the right business account structure, and is that, giving you the most interest, is it eating down fees and that stuff. So I would say make a relationship long before you need it. Talk to a bank or credit union that wants to hear about what you're doing, and make that investment before there's a payoff.
That makes sense. At what point do you guys even look at startup? Well, I guess at what point do you guys consider them non-startup companies, to the fact or the tune that you would loan money to them? Because at the beginning, that's kind of like a no-go. It's like you're way too early. There's nothing to really go off of. There's no financials. At what point? I guess what's the checklist for companies getting started that they would need X, Y, and Z to get a loan from a traditional bank?
I would say, speaking broad to the industry, I think most of the time you're going to see here 2 years as the kind of golden mark. Typically that's because most lending products, you're going to look at the last 2 years of financials. So when they're not there's nothing to go off of. I will say there's some gray area depending on how what their needs are. Credit cards, auto loans, small equipment, a lot of that stuff can be looked at earlier. Typically, I usually say about a year, because you at least want to have a year of historicals to look back on. But there is opportunity for things in that in between, between maybe say a year and 2 years. But even, as a banker, it's like we have resources too, where, sit down and maybe we don't have a loan, but maybe we can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Kind of switching gears off of the traditional banking path. We met in college.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. doing our MBA at Gonzaga. But what advice would you have for kind of those early grads coming out of college to maybe interested in banking or thinking about working for a credit union or a bank or kind of whatnot? What opportunities are there for people to get started?
Gosh, I would say largely, advice-wise, just be curious. Don't be too certain you know what you want to do or don't want to do. I mean, my route to get here was very non-traditional. Yeah. And so, I guess be open to the opportunities that present themselves. I feel like who you meet, who you know, that's at the end of the day, that's usually how opportunities present themselves. So your initial track, great to follow, but just be open to what's around you and what you see. Yeah. And then when it comes to banking specifically, getting in, really understanding, meeting with someone like me or someone in the retail space and knowing what goes into the job, and I guess just ask questions, really know that you understand, what is a typical day look like? Mm-hmm. What do you like about your job? What don't you like about your job? Finding that stuff, because I think we've all kind of learned nowadays. I mean, it's like, if you have a good work-life balance and you like what you do, you're just gonna be so much happier. But depending on how I got started, I mean, very not traditional. So it's like, just be open to what comes your way. What was your route
working or starting for STCU?
So initially it was out of the military. I went to psychology for school. Okay. I worked with wounded for a couple of years as I was getting out, and so I was going to be trauma therapy is what I wanted to do. Found a program at Eastern. Mm-hmm. Went out there. I think a couple weeks before I graduated, I realized love it. Not a sustainable career with kind of how empathetic I was for 50 years. Yeah. So I realized, wow, I kind of got to shift here a little bit. And so I got started in banking, very teller. I mean, right out of the get-go, teller loan officer. Was curious about it. I had some experience with my family in the startups and business, and so I knew I liked that. I knew that was a passion. And so I just slow but sure worked my way through retail, pretty much did every job imaginable, and then worked up to business banking to commercial. And then that's when I went back to school here to Gonzaga and kind of got something a little more on the finance aspect.
For sure. How did getting the MBA change your career trajectory?
I think confidence is a big piece. Okay. Having kind of those areas that maybe you're a little rusty on accounting, or maybe you're a little shaky on financial statements, depending on what the person is. I think having those areas where you're going to get to look at experiences and situations that maybe you don't on a day-to-day basis in your job. So I think that was one of the big parts. The people you meet is huge. I mean, so that's, ours is a little different because it was during, some classes were online, some were with COVID.
Yeah, so odd. I tell people it's like the best thing about getting your MBA is those connections that you make. But then it's hard when it's like, for our program at least, when it was 1 day a week per class for 4 hours or whatever. So it's during that time, at the end of it, you're like, we're friends, we're doing stuff, and it's like, all right, see you next week.
Here we go. Very much. A lot of time at home, so that was unique. But I think at the end of the day, I learned a lot there. But even solidifying what you know and what you think you know, and so I think just I think imposter syndrome hits anyone, no matter what you do for work, no matter how educated you are. Yeah. So I think the more you can do stuff like that to make yourself feel prepared is a win.
That makes sense. Being that you've worked at STCU for, say, 9 years?
Yeah, I think about 9 years.
Where do you think the firm is going in the next 3 to 5?
We've had a lot of growth. I think we're up to 300,000 members now, 1,000 employees. So it's been, that's awesome. It's been a lot of growth, really humble beginnings. So it's been fun to be a part of. And for us, I can speak more to the business side. Mm-hmm. I think it's really going to be, we've built out those services exponentially even since I've been on board. And so it's been exciting to see that investment into businesses and what they're doing. And I think in the next 3 to 5 years, it's really about adapting as things are going to change and the market and what do our business members need. I think that's kind of, at least how I look at it, the big focus of, I think no matter what you do, you got to kind of stay nimble and what does the market need, because that'll change slowly.
Yeah, definitely. When people are coming to you and they're wanting to build their business in Spokane, what do you think is the biggest reason that people build here versus elsewhere?
I think I hear a lot about livability. How feasible it is. We've gotten expensive, but I've obviously lived all around the country, and relatively it's still very doable here, and you have kind of a chance in some areas, and so that I think is huge. I love Spokane. When I found it, moving back here for college, I'm like, I love the balance we have. We have most things you're going to want out of a big city, but not some of the drawbacks. So I think for a business, gosh, I think the exponential growth that we have the opportunity in Spokane, there's still so much vacant land and there's so much that can be built on. You go to some bigger cities and you feel very, there's just a lot of opportunity here. Yeah, so I think that ability to have the family life, to have a place where you feel like you can raise a family and be comfortable and then still operate a business and grow as the region grows, that's kind of my view of it. That's what I hear people talking about.
That's cool. So kind of going from teller to commercial to now business banking and then commercial?
Business banking and then I went to commercial.
Then commercial. What do you think your role looks like in the next 3 to 5? Kind of as the firm grows?
I think it's an interesting time, the way I see it, and technologies and what I think there's a lot of probably unknown of what that looks like. To me, the relationship side is again what there's so much there's so many credit unions, there's so many banks, there's so much similarities in those. I think the ability to finances are very personal to people. A lot of times it's not comfortable to talk about, it's not comfortable to be open about. So I think in my role and what I do, it's really going to be about making those relationships, being trusted by people, that they can bring you a scenario, whether it's good or bad, and you will help them if you can, or you'll at least get them in the right place.
Definitely. I think being that AI is such like a big buzzword right now, like where do you see that affecting, kind of the banking industry as a whole? Is STCU integrating that somewhere? I think, banking, like you said, is such a personal thing, like finances and all that. Like people, I think the banking industry is a little scared. Like we went to a talk like a couple weeks ago and they were talking about how no one wants to really be the first person to integrate AI, especially into banking. It's like, if that screws up, that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. So where do you think that's going?
I'd be taking a swing. I don't know that I have my hunches, and I think there's going to be a lot with streamlining processes and efficiencies, I would say, which that's kind of any sector. For banking, I think the relationship side, I will say I'll be curious to see what institutions do as a whole, because I think there is kind of that fear of who's going to do it, how does it work, how are people receptive to it. Banking is still pretty, again, it's personal. So there's that. I think for some products, there is, if you're going to maybe get a credit card, you might be less concerned about building a relationship than if you're doing an SBA loan with your business and you're not sure where to start. So I can't say I really know. I think there will be changes. I'm hopeful that it will, frankly, just make the user experience that much faster, that much, if you need a quick answer, it's just going to make it that much more streamlined. But I don't know if I see, especially in what I do in the commercial and business side, I think, at least for a long while, there's still a huge need and people want to know. Again, COVID, I think it took it, in my experience, I saw it actually set people back a little bit. People are like, whoa. Maybe I don't want this just randomly online and 1-800 number. Maybe I want to have someone's cell number. It's that side.
I think you saw a lot of people wanting to get back in the office, wanting to do more in-person events and community structured things. So that all totally makes sense. But that's awesome.
But it'll be definitely, I don't know if it'll be kind of a watch and wait. Yeah,
we'll see. Well, thanks for coming on. Where can people find you? If they want to connect with you, if they want to, hang out with you, ask you more questions about banking or anything else.
Always, LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on there, so feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. Any questions, you can find me on our website, my email, phone, always on there. I would just say, don't feel you need to reach out to someone like me only when you have a need. If you just want someone to ask questions about resources, need pointed in the right direction, we're always happy to help.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.